Hello, welcome to Trivial Knits. My name is Laura, and this is a YouTube knitting podcast where I talk about what I'm working on, what I've knit in the past, what I want to knit in the future. We talk about yarn, fiber, and I always share some knitting or fiber trivia at the end, hence the name Trivial Knits. The name of the channel also comes from the fact that I'm not a big garment knitter. I live in Los Angeles. I don't need a lot of woolly knitted things, but I love to knit them. So I make a lot of just colorful accessories that are really just for fun, hence the name Trivial. And as you may have known from my previous videos, I'm a bit of a Westknits super fan. I've been knitting Westknits patterns for over 10 years at least, but I became sort of much more devoted as a follower in about 2019. So I started sort of going back into his catalog of patterns and knitting a lot of them. I've knitted 60 plus shawls and hats and cowls and other patterns of his. And a couple years ago, I became a test knitter for Westknits. So I have done a few patterns of his that way. But this video here is about the MKAL, the Mystery Knit Along, which is, as some people call it, Christmas time for knitters. Of course, if you're not a Westknits fan, it probably doesn't feel like that fun of a time of year for you, but you're probably not watching this video if you are not a Westknits fan. So it is a very exciting time. It is when Stephen releases a shawl knitting pattern that is only released in pieces. So it remains a mystery. You don't get to see the finished object before you decide to knit it. And it has become just kind of a big knitting community experience where, thousands of people around the world, I would guess it's thousands, hundreds at least, but probably thousands of knitters are working on the same project. And each week during October are receiving new clues or pieces of the pattern that they're working on. And then we all share what our progress is. We share the colors that we've chosen. Everyone picks, unique combinations. And it's just, I found it a really fun experience. So I thought because we're approaching that time of year again, and because the kits have been released for this year's MKAL, and the name of the shawl, which is Go Go Dynamo, I'm pretty sure, um, uh, I thought it would be a good time to sort of talk about the experience of participating in the MKAL. I'm going to show you my MKAL shawls from the last 4 years. That's as long as I've been doing the MKAL. I'll give you my sort of tips for making the most of the experience. And then I think at the end I might talk about some of the previous MKAL shawls I want to go back and make at some point. And then I'll end with a little bit of trivia. So I want to just preface this by saying I did not test knit the MKAL pattern this year. I know that Stephen and his test knit coordinator, Linda, keep that one pretty closely guarded, and it's a very trusted inner circle of testers who do the MKAL shawl. So I'm not privy to that. So I know really nothing about the pattern that's coming out. I've found out the same as everyone else what is coming up. So I have no spoilers here, but I will share what I'm planning or what I'm considering as far as the yarns I'm going to use. And I have some tips about how to choose your yarns if you want some from an experienced knitter. Okay, so and at the end, of course, as in every video, I'll do some trivia. I might have said that already, but that's how we'll end the video. And if you have an answer to the trivia questions, you can always leave them in the comments below. All right. So we're going to go back to 2020. This was the first year I participated in the MKAL, and the pattern that year was called the Slipstravaganza. So I'm going to show you mine. Get it here. I'll back up maybe a little so you can see the whole thing. and maybe I'll put it on while I'm talking about it. We just had a heat wave here in Los Angeles, but it's thankfully over, so it's not too warm today for me to wear my shawls and talk about them. So this is the Slipstravaganza. I purchased a kit for it this year in 2020. And it is the first and actually last time that I've purchased a kit from Stephen and Penelope, which is nothing against the kits. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But this one, I don't knit with a lot of red, but for some reason, this particular, and I also don't knit with a lot of neutrals like beiges, but this kit just kind of jumped out at me when I saw it on the website. So I sort of impulse bought it and made up this pattern. So this one, so they always come in 4 sections. So you get the piece of the pattern that corresponds to each section 1 week at a time. So this one we knit up, this triangle section was first, and this is a motif that Stephen has used quite a bit. It's like a slip stitch, sort of honeycomb. You know, he's called it painting bricks in some of his other patterns. When he does kind of a wider spot, he calls it a brick. Here it's maybe closer to a honeycomb, and he does have a couple patterns called honeycombs or that have, you know, the honey motif right in the pattern name. And then the second piece of it, I think, was here, and then maybe this sort of diamond painting bricks motif here. And then you know, I don't quite remember, you know, whether this was 2 clues or 1 clue, but I have to think it was 2. And then the border was probably its own. And this is like the woven chevrons motif on the border here. And like one thing you'll notice if you are familiar with Stephen West patterns is he repeats motifs a lot. He'll sort of like incorporate things into maybe an MKAL shawl, and then he'll kind of run with them and release more patterns that use that motif. So that's one nice thing about the MKAL is it's almost like a sampler of different stitch motifs, different techniques. And if you like some of them, or one of them in particular, you can usually find more patterns of Stephen's that use it. So you can kind of keep the fun going. Or you can wait for new patterns to come out and you know, you'll kind of know which ones you want to do next. And the other nice thing about the MKAL is that there's a lot of hand-holding with the techniques. So Stephen records video tutorials for every part of the pattern. So it really is beginner friendly, in my opinion. None of these techniques are very hard once you know how to do them. So it's a good opportunity to get like video tutorials for a pattern because he always does that for the MKAL shawls. He does that for many of his other shawl patterns as well, but especially for the MKAL. So yeah, so the yarn here, I believe this is a kit from Life in the Long Grass. And it is singles. So it's, the yarns are single plied merino, which I don't use very often, but I want to try to again at some point because it produces a very drapey fabric and it's like kind of sheeny or shiny. So it's kind of good for certain shawls, you know, depending on the look you're going for, but I liked this one. So that was the Slipstravaganza. And I would say this is like my second favorite of the MKAL shawls that I have made. I really like the pattern here. I also really liked seeing the other color combinations that people have come up with. I almost want to make this again with like copying other people's colors. I probably won't do that, but that is another great thing about the MKALs is so many people are working on the same thing at the same time that you can expose yourself to a lot of different approaches to the same pattern. So, okay, so Slipstravaganza, second favorite. All right, then the next year, so 2021, was Shawlography. And again, these all have that kind of sampler look to them. So this one had this sort of circular shape to it. They both, I guess both the Slipstravaganza and the Shawlography are kind of circular shawls, center out. Um, so you made this sort of section first, which is really cool. I just think that graphic pop is neat. And then there was, this section, which is also various sort of slip stitch and knit purl techniques, and the shrimps. That's what I think Stephen called these little pieces, and they're like little mini I cords all around the width of the shawl. Was not a fan of those. I don't like them. I will never make another pattern that has them. And if I found another pattern that had them, I would take them out. But that's kind of the beauty of the MKAL is you just kind of go with it. You try the technique. It might be a technique you would never purposely try in any other scenario, but this time you're kind of forced to. And so it's good. Sometimes it's good to expose yourself to things that you aren't familiar with, so you can make an informed decision about whether you want to ever do them again. So that was the second section. Then the third section was this section here, which I ended up taking a mohair dare with, which is a thing that Stephen often does, where it's sort of like an opportunity to incorporate mohair into your shawl. Now, I don't know if he like specifically recommended using mohair in this section of the shawl. I am not very happy with how it came out, I have to say. I think I went rogue. I think I was the one who just decided, okay, that's where I'm going to put my mohair. And it's such a different weight than the rest of the shawl that I'm not sure it's very successful. And the contrast between the two colors, there are two colors here. I don't know if you can even really see them on camera. There's like a greenish and a pinkish. Yeah, so not not a super fan of that part of it. And then the last section, well, then there's this brioche section here. And often the MKALs have like a brioche option. So there'll be a part that has brioche, but you can choose to just do like knits and purls or garter stitch or something instead of the brioche. I did the brioche here. And then there were these crossover stitches. I'm actually not sure of the name of this stitch technique, but it looks really nice. I'll see if I can hold it up. It's like an 8 stitch pattern where I can't even really remember how it's constructed, but you're like crossing over 4 stitches with another 4 stitches. And I also very much disliked making these. So, while I do think they look really nice and I'm glad that I did them once, I would again probably not ever do it again if I had the option. And then I think the very last step was this applied or sort of modular um, border that is at like perpendicular to the rest of the shawl, and kind of a circusy stripe to it. So this one I made out of majority of Holst Super Soft, which is a very budget friendly yarn from Denmark, I want to say. But you can buy it from Stephen and Penelope, and they often have MKAL kits with Holst Super Soft, and it's much more budget friendly than a lot of the sort of hand dyed merino skeins. These you can get for a few dollars a ball. And so this year, this 2021, I did not order a kit. I ordered just like a million different colors of the whole super soft because they're so cheap. And then I just tried a bunch of different combinations to see what I liked. And I ended up sort of picking this. It's like an army green. I don't know if it's translating on camera, but I picked that army green for my sort of main color. And then I picked these 4 sort of like not pastels, but less saturated colors to be my accents. So there's like a mint green or a sage green, might be better to say, kind of a blush pink. Although I'm now noticing I actually used a scrap here of a different yarn, like I think a single ply yarn for my pink. So that actually wasn't the Holst, but you can't even tell really. So another lesson we'll get to in the tip section about you can kind of get away with using scraps and stuff from your stash quite a bit. Um, then this sort of, I don't know, like a light pumpkin color. It's like orangey, but not not like Halloween orange. And then more of a lime green here. So those are the colors. And then the in the mohair section, I used kind of a blush colored mohair that I can't remember what brand it is. It might be Knit Picks, but it might not be. Um, but yeah, so in sort of rating this one, it's a very classic, like Stephen West type pattern where it's like the sampler, lots of different stitch techniques, very busy looking, 5 different colors. Um, so it's not, that's what you get when you get Stephen West. And I'm a Stephen West super fan. I would say I don't wear my shawls like this that often, but it's more about almost making a piece of art. It's more about the fun of making it, and like the busyness is all part of it. But I will say I don't wear this one very much. That also probably has to do with the Holst yarn is a little scratchy. It's a pretty rustic yarn. That's part of why it's so cost effective. And you can wash it, with like dish soap. And there are ways to make it sort of soften up. I have not really had much success getting it to be super soft. It's just, even though that's the name of the yarn, super soft, it's just not super soft. It is softish, which is fine. But yeah, so I would actually probably rank this my third favorite of the 4 um, MKAL shawls that I have made. But it was fun to make for sure. Um, okay, so let's go to the next year. So then the next year, 2022, was Twists and Turns. So I will hold up my shawl for you. So this one is quite large, and it's a different shape than the previous 2 were like the kind of classic circle. This one you started with this center section, which is like chevrons and these I-cord loops that were kind of similar to the shrimps from the previous year. But then you braid the loops. And I love the way that looks. That is so cool. I did not enjoy actually making them. I mean, I enjoyed it in the sense that it was a challenge. I would not make another shawl with this motif, probably, even though I really like how it looks visually. The effort would not be worth it to me. So you did that. And then I believe you did the wings, these little like garter stitch alternated with brioche um, little section. So there's this is the green parts here in mine are garter, and then the pink, I believe, are brioche, but you probably had an option to just make them also garter or something. And then after that was this sort of his painting stripes motif where it's garter stitch in the main color and then stockinette stitch in the contrast colors. And here, well, I'll talk about my color choices in just a second. Then the third section was this cable knit section that was sort of applied to the previous section. And so that's, pretty. I'm not a huge cable person. I will do a cable. So this, again, kind of got me out of my comfort zone. And then this section, it was also made with cables, if I'm recalling correctly. But it was like cabling without a cable needle. So it kind of has that sort of undulating look. I think you probably could achieve that with just knits and pearls if you did it a little bit differently. But I believe this was like a twisted rib cable. They all kind of melt together, but I think that's how it was done. And then the last little piece was this sort of border that got attached to the bottom, which there's, again, brioche, and then the kind of painting chevrons motif that I really like from Stephen. So my colors for this one, I did not purchase a kit. I I purchased a few skeins of things that I thought would work, and then I just figured I'd put whatever I got that I didn't use in my stash, which is what I ended up doing. So this dark green is actually kind of a variegated. I think you can tell the best in this section. This is a variegated fingering weight sock yarn from Meadow Yarns. Very pretty. I ordered a few different colors from her at that time, and I think I might actually use some of the other ones I ordered this year. Um, but so they've been sitting in my stash for a couple of years now. But so that was kind of my main color, and then my first contrasting color is this, again, kind of a very light sage or mint green. And this was a skein, like just one skein I had from Qing Fibre. That was like a BFL sock, I want to say. And I thought those two colors were nice high contrast while still both being green. And then I think the third color, I was between two colors to be my third color. I was between this neon pink, which is La Bien Aimee merino sock. The color is As If. I was between that and this color, which is like one of my very favorite colors from La Bien Aimee, the cocoa color. And I decided to go with pink. And so I did the next section with pink. And then I was like, oh, I still want that like chartreuse color in it. So then I added a fourth color, which I don't think was called for in the original pattern, but I like the way it turned out. Now, in retrospect, looking at it, I don't think the pink goes. I think if I was going to do this over, I would probably do it just in the three green colors. But it's a fun little color pop. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it doesn't go. It's just like not as me. This is another one I really don't wear. To be honest, it's quite large, and I don't know what outfit that would match, but not an outfit that I would wear. But again, I just do them for the fun of it, not necessarily to have something I'm going to incorporate into my wardrobe on a regular basis. So yeah, this one, I would probably say this was my least favorite of the finished objects. Um, I don't know if it was my least favorite to knit, but there was a lot of fiddly pieces to this one. So I could understand if people sort of gave up in section one, but that's not my style usually. So yeah, I'm glad I persevered. I'm glad I tried all the techniques. I'm glad I finished it. And now it is a beautiful object that sort of sits in my knitting collection. Okay, now we will get to my favorite of the MKALs to date, which is the Geogradient. And I've actually shown this one on the channel before because I actually just finished it the early part of this year, 2024. So here it is. So this one uses 4 colors of Westwool, which is the house yarn at Stephen and Penelope. And I did not purchase a kit. I made my own color combo here with kind of my favorite of the Westwool colors. My absolute favorite color of Westwool is Dijon, which is this one here. But I wanted to do kind of a gradient. So it's a green gradient with a little very pale pink, almost it's peach. This is the white peach color. So it's the Wellington colorway, which is this army green. It's green olive, or no, yeah, I think it's called, or olive green. I think it's olive, some kind of olive. Also, it's kind of a bottle green. And Dijon, and then this is the white peach. And I just love these colors. And this is actually my favorite of the shawls, both because of the pattern, but also because of the yarn. This is one of my favorite yarns. It is non-superwash, but it's also pretty soft. And I love working with it. It's just a really nice yarn to knit with. So it was enjoyable to make. And actually, I have to say, Of the last 3 years, this was maybe the easiest of this kind of stitch techniques. This is also one that I made after I began test knitting for Stephen. So some of these techniques I was already a little familiar with. Not that I had seen this pattern yet, but like for example, I already knew how to do the dip stitch section because this was part of his treasure trove collection that I test knit a couple things from. Um, yeah, so I don't think that's why it was easier. I think it just happened to be kind of a little easier, less fiddly techniques this time. Um, and this one, it started in the center. So you made the center square first. And this was a place you could really personalize it. He had an original pattern that he ended up changing, and and then he put out, an alternative that you could do. I ended up kind of making it my own alternate center square because I wanted to do the perpendicular stripes, not just like concentric squares. So I did this kind of myself. I really don't remember what I did, so I'm sorry. I can't like provide instructions for anyone, but I believe I made this triangle first. And I can't remember if I started at that tip or started at the long end. And then I picked up these stripes. Um, I'm pretty sure that's how I did it. And again, I'm very sorry. I could not explain to you how I did it in retrospect, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. Then you did these like concentric squares around it, or that's what I ended up doing is concentric squares. Then you kind of built on that with more these two kind of chevron shapes to the side with yarn overs and knit togethers, I think, are kind of how this is achieved. And then there was this section, which was really fun. This is like a slip stitch kind of motif that I wasn't sure how I would enjoy doing it, but I did end up enjoying it. And I think it turned out looking pretty cool. And then you put on the border. And then I chose to add fringe. I think Steven's version had fringe. And I really like the way that short fringe looks. It has like a really cute, like vintage Afghan kind of look to it, which my colors sort of play into as well. So, and the Stevens colors, I think he was sort of inspired by vintage quilts or tile or something. Um, so yeah, I'm very happy with this one. This is my favorite. If I was going to wear a shawl, this would be one of the shawls I would reach for. So I have high hopes for this next year that it's going to be sort of in the same vein. Um, so yeah, so let's talk about this year's. So this year it's called the Go-Go Dynamo, and it's 2 colors, which I'm excited about. So you noticed the last few years have all been like 3, 4, 5 color shawls, and he hasn't done a 2 color shawl since 2019. This whenever the Starflake was. Um, And I really like that shawl. I haven't knit it yet, but it's on my list of things to knit. And so I was excited to see that this year's shawl is also a 2 color design. So, I was kind of inspired to pick out the colors for that. So let me show you what I'm thinking as far as my colors. And I don't have them right here. So I'm going to hop up and get them. Be right back. Okay. So I'm actually going to take off the shawl that I'm wearing because it is getting a little hot here. Okay, so it's a 2 color shawl, and it seems that contrast is kind of what you want to go for. Now you don't have to do that. I think some of the kits have a lower contrast to them, but it sounds like to really make the most of the pattern, Stevens is encouraging high contrast. So I pulled out. So I wanted to use stash yarn for one thing. So that involved going to my stash and figuring out what I have enough of. So that limits me a little bit, which is probably good because you need some limits on this. Otherwise, you could just obsess over it. So I have these 2 skeins that I actually bought to possibly use in my twists and turns in 2022, and I never used them. So I had 200 grams of, this is Meadow Yarn fingering 100% superwash merino. So it's actually, I mean, I guess it's a sock yarn, but there's no nylon content in it. Um, and it's kind of like a muddy pastel. It's not very light, which I don't think light colors really look good on me. But this is kind of a more muted, darker, almost looks like it was like dyed on a gray base, which I don't think is the case, but that's kind of how it looks. Um, so I thought, okay, this could be like my variegated yarn because in the kits, there's often like a solid color and a variegated. So I thought this could serve as my variegated. And then I went, the other yarn I have a lot of in my stash is Westwool Bicycle. So I looked at there and I looked at what I had 200 grams of, because again, you need 200 grams of each color. And I found two options that I think work. So this is Wellington. This is, I think, the old formulation of Westwool, but you can still get it in this color. So this is a very dark green, like a forest / army green. I think it's a little warmer than forest. Let's see if I can hold it so you can get a good look at the color. Oh, that's good. But it's dark. So I like that. And so if I were to do it with this, I think it goes really nice. It's like a high contrast. Sorry, I'm just trying to like get it in the best light so you can see how they look together. So yeah, I think that's good. Now, I'm like a little hesitant to do this combo because my last 3 MKAL shawls have all been green, which green is one of my favorite colors, so that makes sense. But I'm like kind of want to change it up a little bit. So the other color that I have a lot of is one of my other favorites, this cardamom, which is like a rust or terracotta red. And so that I think also looks really nice. It contrasts with like the dominant green of the variegated in a really nice way. And it's very like autumny. So I think it will be a very good like fall knit, which is of course when the MKAL takes place. So this is where I'm leaning. I think this is what I'm going to do. I have not caked them up, so I have not fully committed yet. But, once you get the first clue and you see Stephen's sample, you can make a little more informed decision. So if you are going to build your kit from stash, have a couple options in mind, wait till the first clue is released, and then you can sort of figure out what you really want to do, is my suggestion. So, so this is what I'm gonna probably do. I'll be back. I might post some more videos during the MKAL, but I'll definitely be posting on Instagram. So if you follow me at Trivial Knits, you'll see how these end up knitting up together if I end up going with these colors. Okay, so I want to talk about just a couple like tips, and I've already touched on some of these, but I thought if you've never done an MKAL before, you might enjoy some advice. So if it's your very first time participating in the MKAL, I do kind of recommend getting a kit because then you know that the yarns have been sort of pre-approved to work well in the pattern. Stephen curates all the kits, and he's the one who designed the pattern, so like he's not going to steer you into something that doesn't work at all. Now, if you don't share Stephen's taste, fine, but there's a lot of different options. So if you go to stephenandpenelope.com, they'll have a little section of the website with all the kits. And so you can see what's there. They also tend to have things at different price points. So they have super expensive ones, but they also have more affordable ones. And I've found that like shipping is not so bad for them. And if you're in the US, of course, if you're watching this from somewhere else, your mileage may vary, but you also don't get charged the value added tax that would be charged in the EU. So the price it's expensive yarn, but it's not like outrageous to purchase it from Amsterdam and have it shipped to you. And then again, they also have sort of lower cost options. If you buy the kit, you also get like little goodies that go with it. You get like a pin, I think, and stickers. Like I never end up using that stuff, so don't feel too much FOMO about not getting the actual kit. But if you like that stuff, get the kit. Um, so tip number one is consider getting a kit. You'll know that the yarn content as well, like the structure of the yarn and the fiber content, is going to work for this type of object. And there will again be different options. There's usually some singles, there's usually like sock yarn. Um, so you can kind of see what's all been kind of pre-approved and works for you. So, but then my tip number two is if you can't afford a kit or you don't want to buy new yarn for this, I would copy the kits. And by that, I mean, look at the color play between the yarns that are in the pre-made kits and try to go for the same thing with yarn from your stash or with yarn from your local yarn store. Um, for this one, a lot of the kits are like a solid color with a high contrast against a variegated color or two solids with a high contrast. So that's what I would try to go for if you're picking stuff from your own stash. And that's what I ended up doing as well. You know, with my two possible combos, I went for sort of the softer variegated and a bold, high contrast, solid color. The kits also have the option, I think, to add the mohair dare, which Stephen is suggesting. There will be at some points in the pattern where you can add a mohair in for either a color pop that contrasts with your two regular colors or in the same color as one of your main colors. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that yet. I had kind of bad experience the one time I did the mohair dare, in that I just didn't like how it ended up turning out. I do have mohair from Knitting for Olive in the rust colorway, so it would be very close to this. So I could do it if I want. I'm not sure. But yeah, so that's another option you can add. Okay, so my first tip was consider getting a kit. Second tip was copy the kits. Third tip, which I've covered a little bit, is to think about fiber content and the structure of the yarn. So I'm gonna grab two of my shawls that I just showed to show you what I mean. So these are kind of two pretty different yarns. They're both fingering weight, but this one here is a single ply. And so, like I said, it has a very like drapey feel to it. It's kind of shiny, silky, that's the vibe here. This is Westwool, non-superwash. I think this is the 100% merino. And it has has more body to it. It's more, it like bunches up a little bit more. I feel like it's more cozy. It's better for warmth. So you kind of have to think about what you're looking for in your finished object and what kind of shawls you like to wear or have. So yeah, pay attention to not just the colors, but also the fiber content and the way the yarn is spun or plied or whatever. Okay, my fourth tip is not to worry or stress about keeping up with the MKAL. So it's designed to be knit over the course of a month. And each clue comes out each week. And I would say like the first clue often is quite realistic to get done in 1 week. And then as they go on, it gets harder to finish everything in 1 week. And I have had years where I have stayed on track. I think 2021 and 2022, I kept up with it every week, finished it on, the timeline, the prescribed timeline. But for whatever it's worth, the two shawls I like the best were ones where I finished them months later. So I don't know that those things are correlated, but I would say you'll still enjoy having the shawl. I mean, if you're really worried about like spoilers and like seeing the finished object before you get to it, then you got to stay on track because everyone's going to be posting it once the MKAL ends. But I have found that that's not that important. And so take your time with it. I mean, it's fun to knit along with everybody while they're doing it, but if that's not your thing, don't worry about that. My fifth tip is to watch the tutorial videos. They are very well made. Stephen is a good teacher. They're, well produced. And he goes through stitch by stitch, telling you how to do this shawl. So even if you are very familiar with his style of pattern writing and all the stitches involved, which I am, I still really find it helpful to watch the videos because, you know, there's always a new technique or something kind of sort of spicy thrown in there. Um, so it's just good to see like how he does it. And he'll often throw in sort of more intangible tips for like, okay, here's how you pick up those 3 stitches you need to pick up now. You know, that aren't going to be written into the pattern, but will be in the video tutorial. So, and I find it especially helpful when you need to pick up a lot of stitches because he does a lot of modular knitting where you're like doing a section and then you're like picking up stitches along like the side border of that section. And you know, you could figure that out. Like, okay, I need to pick up 50 stitches and there's 65 stitches here. You could figure it out with math, or you could just watch the video and he'll show you like exactly how many to skip and how many to pick up and all that. So I think the videos are very helpful. Um, so that's my 5th tip. And then my 6th tip, my last tip, is to just like enjoy the community vibe of it. Take inspiration from other knitters, look at what other people have put together as far as their kits or their color combos. Um, if you don't have to start right on the start date, like if that's not so important to you, wait a week and see what everyone's doing. And then you'll see like, oh, I really like what that person did. You know, I've definitely had those moments of like, oh, I wish I had picked those colors and not the colors I picked. Um, so yeah, it's okay to like wait it out, see what everyone else is doing, um, or do your own thing, but then enjoy what other people are doing and like make notes for next time. So like what I've done with when I really liked, you know, this one, people picked all different combinations of 4 colors. I have a little Instagram folder where I would save people's colors for like color inspiration, not because I want to make this one again, but next time I need to do a 4-color shawl, I've got a whole bunch of ideas that I can draw on. So I recommend doing that. Okay, so there have been um, several MKALs. We are, you know, well into the MKAL series. I'm not going to tell you how many there's been because that's going to be my trivia question later. Um, but there are 3 MKAL shawls that I want to go back and make. I did not make them at the time, but they are in my queue. They're in my library. So I want to do the Starflake, which is a 2-color kind of high contrast shawl. I've been having the hardest time deciding on what colors I want to do for that. So I still haven't made it yet. And it's a big, you know, they're a big time commitment, so haven't gotten to that one yet. I would like to do the Exploration Station. And for that one, I'm thinking of using like a single ply. Um, and I have some colors in mind. So maybe you'll see that in a future video. And the Rockefeller, which is a 2-color one again. I like the 2-color combo. So again, I'm very happy that that's what we're doing this year. And that one is a very geometric, I think a pretty simple, it was one of the earlier ones, maybe the second MKAL. So I think it'll be a pretty easy knit to do. So I'll do that someday. So I would love to hear in the comments if you have made the Starflake, the Exploration Station, or the Rockefeller, how you liked them, if you have yarn suggestions, what color combos you used. I would love to find that out from you. So please let me know in the comments. Okay, so we'll wrap up with some trivia. So I kind of previewed the first trivia question, which is how many mystery knit-alongs have there been from Westknits? What number are we on this year in 2024? That's a pretty easy question. You can find it out very easily, but try and guess and put your answer in the comments. And then my bonus question, which I actually don't know the answer to, I'll have to go look it up, is what is the most common number of colors that Stephen has used for an MKAL shawl? So some of them are 2-color, some of them are 5-color. Geogradient was 4 colors. So of the total number of MKAL shawls, what is the most common number of colors that Stephen designs with for them? So if you know the answer to that, please let me know. I'll go do my research and see if I can figure out as well. But yeah, the trivia is always just kind of just for fun. There's no prize if you get it right, but it's just kind of the glory of having gotten it right or having made a good, educated guess. And if you don't want to guess, just go look at the comments and see what people have guessed before you. And I usually try to let people know if they guess correctly. So yeah, so that's it for this video. I've got a few more planned for the rest of the fall. Hopefully I'll be back before too long. But enjoy your MKAL. Let me know what colors you're using. You know, I'd love to see your progress on Instagram. So get in touch that way if you'd like. Um, and hopefully we'll have a fun year. All right. See you guys.